This is Radio TV Phoner Nut, and here we have another unboxing. And no, this is not from Shango 066. This is something I bought cheap off of eBay for parts to fix something else. But I can tell they didn't pack it worth a darn, as you can hear. So let's open it up and see if the post office made it easier for me to get this apart and get the needed parts I need out of it. Well, I can see they use this space age one layer of bubble wrap and this special styrofoam that keeps things from coming apart. And we can see the case is falling apart on here, so and there's Shango 066. I'm sorry you didn't get to see the one you sent me get busted to heck and back, but we'll try to make up for it with this one. And yes, if I really wanted to save this bad enough, I could just glue the bottom back on and recover the case in something. Don't look like it'd be much trouble to recover. This stuff's already coming off. Alright, let's see what we got on the inside here. What's the brand of this thing? They said it was a Symphonic. It is a Symphonic. Well, I might have to save this and send it to somebody. I don't know. I know somebody who likes Symphonic record players, but yeah, really this is just really too far gone to be saved economically. Here's the cartridge out of it, dated 1950. Yes, they were still making 78 only record players that late. Heck, you never can tell. I might just glue this thing back together and not worry about how bad it looks, just to see if I can get it working again. This amplifier is about as basic as they come, a single 70L7 tube, which is the power amplifier tube and the rectifier tube all rolled into one. The only capacitor in this thing is this 3-section filter capacitor here. Hot chassis looks like. So yeah, this is your typical cheap chassis of death record player. And our 3-volt crystal cartridge, it's most likely bad, but we can just replace it with an 89T and it'll still have enough kick to operate this thing. Heck, this old paper covering's coming off so easy, I may just strip it down, glue the cabinet back together, and just paint the wood some crazy color. I mean, it's obvious this is not going to be original, so, you know, we'll just do whatever with it. Okay, this is really not a hot chassis. They have everything connected to the ground of the filter condenser, and the filter condenser is isolated from the chassis, so you know the chassis is just completely isolated here, looks like. But look at this, there's nothing to this amp, basically just the tube, the volume control, few resistors, and that's it. Output transformer and speaker. Okay, we have it plugged into the extension cord. We're going to turn it on, and I don't care if it does blow up. If it does, that'll give you something to entertain you. Sounds like the motor's trying to turn, but it's froze up. Tube is lighting up. Amplifier's working, but then again, there's not much to go wrong here. That amplifier is pretty stout for a one-tube wonder. Okay, we got the motor taken apart, and getting this clip off that holds this fan blade on can be a little bit tedious, and you want to be careful or otherwise you'll stab yourself. and I have all the parts in order, how they go back over the motor shaft, this little felt wicking that we'll apply oil to when we put it all back together. This little clip, fan goes on top, and then that clip goes over the fan to hold it in. Now let me give you a word of caution about these Alliance motors, and I don't care whether it's something from the 78 era or a multi-speed player from the 70s. The bushings in these Alliance motors are held into this assembly by these little fingers here. And what's bad about happening with these, they'll get gunked up and the shaft will become seized to the bushing, making it hard to get out. If you pull and tug on this trying to get it out, this bushing will come out of here, and once it comes out, it's game over because you're not going to get it back in there. Now I found that when you get one of these that's stubborn and won't just easily pull out, you can use heat from a soldering iron or a heat gun to usually free things up, and it'll pull off, but be extremely careful, because if this pulls out, that's it. In fact, I had it happen the other day, and I was trying to be careful, but thank goodness I had something in my junk box. I needed this bottom assembly out of my junk box. I just swapped the whole thing around. Here's our rotor and our top bushing assembly. This was very gunked up, wouldn't turn, but it's really not easy to get this apart and clean it because you have this keeper. Of course, I could break that off, that wouldn't be a problem, but then we have this brass collar up here that's pressed onto the shaft, and I really wouldn't want to try to get that off. It might not go back. So I just cleaned it the best I could with contact cleaner and soaked the wick with Zoom spout oil, and it's turning very freely now. And I also treated the rubber drive wheel with rubber renew and cleaned and lubricated our spindle bearing. It's nice and smooth now. Here's the motor, and it's running nice and quietly now. Now we need to worry about the rubber motor mounting grommet. And the seller said that this thing had been in an attic for decades, and I can believe it. These rubber motor mounts are so, well, they're just totally hard now, and I had to break them to get them out. These are not like the usual cone-shaped mounts that we see on the multi-speed players. These are more like just regular grommets, and I've got some grommets here. Hopefully I can find something that I can make work. It's really not that critical here, just as long as since this is a single speed player, just as long as the motor is stable and not wobbling around too much. This is the closest thing I'm going to have to it. The center on these newer ones is a little bit bigger, but I can run some heat shrink tubing around the spacers here to make it fit a little tighter, and then that should do the trick. Now the problem is going to be squeezing these and making them fit through the holes. Okay, the grommets of choice wouldn't work, so I'm using the standard cone grommets with the cone shape pointing down. Had to run some heat shrink tubing around the standoffs or spacers to keep it nice and snug, and then I put a rubber O-ring over here to where everything will line up and then not vibrate. Okay, here we are running. It's a little noisy because the idler wheel's got a slight little dent in it, but it's not too bad. It could be a lot worse. Okay, it's all somewhat back together. Probably am going to have that wheel rebuilt eventually. It's a little noisy, but it could be a whole lot worse. I replaced the cartridge with an 89T using the 78 side. This cartridge didn't quite hang down enough, and I didn't have any spacers, so I just cut off the flipper handle since it won't be needed on this record player anyway. And all I've done so far to the amplifier is replace or clean the volume control. I've done nothing as far as checking resistors or capacitors. It obviously has no filter hum. Speaker needs to be replaced.
Now if I was a millionaire, I'd be poor, and I'll tell you why.
Okay. Okay, this screen dropping resistor is supposed to be 680 ohms. It's reading a little over 800. Our 220 ohm cathode resistor for the output tube is 220. It's reading about 250. Okay, I can't see the values on this filter can, but most likely 50 microfarad, 30 microfarad, and 20 for the cathode bypass. The cathode section is reading 58, so it's up high. And then the other two sections, one reads 17 and one reads 28, so they're low. They're still doing a pretty good job of filtering, but you know, they need to be replaced. And I'm going to get rid of this can completely, because if I decide to put a tube preamp stage here, I'll need this space for a socket, and I can put the filters over here somewhere. Also, this output transformer, I don't like the way it's mounted, just on one bolt on the speaker. There's a hole here with nothing in it, so that makes me wonder if possibly this had a bigger output transformer mounted at one time and it failed and somebody just stuck it here. I can't imagine anything like this coming from the factory, but with these cheaper record players, you never know. Okay, we're about ready to call this one done, I hope, as far as the electronics go. We replaced our filter capacitors, installed them on terminal strips here. Our 6.8 k ohm, or 680 ohm resistor that we replaced. And then our 220 ohm cathode resistor with our electrolytic capacitor in parallel with it. You know, these nice new modern smaller parts make things a lot easier. I removed the old filter capacitor, and where it was mounted is where I mounted the speaker output transformer, so it won't be just loosely attached. And our old speaker had a rubbing voice coil, so I just took the one out of that old Fisher-Price record player that we EOL'd a while back and stuck it in here, and hopefully it'll sound okay. Should be good enough for this. And we replaced the old crumbling motor wires. As you can see, I have nice new ones installed and heat shrinked in place, so won't nothing short out. So let's put it back in the old dilapidated case and see what happens. Okay, this is just lovely. The tube's lighting up, so that tells us we're getting juice. But I'm not getting a tick from the speaker whenever I rub the cartridge, and I'm not getting any motor rotation. So what the devil's going on here? Okay, well the motor coil reads good, so what's going on here? Okay, well that was easy. Cold solder joint caused by me not paying close enough attention, so now it's running and I'm getting a tick out of the speaker, so let's put it back together and see if we can successfully play a record. I'm hoping. Yeah, that's good.
You'll let me know that everything's alright.
It would be louder if it had a 3-volt cartridge in it, but we don't have one of those at the moment. And I'm not going to put a preamp stage in here. It's not that soft, and besides, I occupied our extra tube socket with mounting the audio output transformer, so scratch that idea. And it's not like this record player is going to be used for filling a school classroom or auditorium with sound. This is more or less a personal use item. If somebody wants to fill an entire room with sound that everybody can hear, then, you know, get a higher powered classroom record player. Okay, back with the Symphonic record player. Took a different direction with this. I decided I wasn't going to waste hours and hours and hours and hours and money and money and money and money trying to make this thing look great, so I just found an old can of gray spray paint, and I intentionally tried to make this thing look as hideous as possible, and I think I did a pretty good job of it. But before I show you the rest of the cabinet, we'll play a little bit of a recording here.
Good to me, and I didn't realize what kiss could
Certainly not the Everly Brothers.
On Tuesday they caught me with a fire. On Wednesday I'm down in solitary. And no bread and water for a while I got trapped around my door.
All right. Let's play a real 78.
Where is your heart tonight? You look at me with eyes that do not see.
Okay, there you go. So if you want this hideous looking record player, it'll be on eBay, and if you want to do something to the case, then have at it. Who's calling? It must be my bookie. But yeah, as you can see, this is very classy. Ooh. Sure somebody will run this up to $900. Might even get a trend started with doing this to record players. Oh wait, that trend's already been started. Some of the flea market vendors are already doing this crap. In fact, I remember one Philco Forward little tube console stereo at the flea market that the flea market vendor painted red and gray with a rattle can, and he wanted to sell it to me for $40, and I said, no, that's not going to happen. After you ruined the cabinet, if you'd have left it alone, I might have bought it from you. And of course it didn't work either. Well, the next couple of weeks I was back in there, and he just had to tell me that some woman come in and bought it, and she just thought it was the cutest thing in the world to sit her flat screen TV on top of it. Now, as you might expect, I'm glad that he made a sale, but I was a little resentful about it, because had I had that stereo and kept the cabinet in nice shape and redone the electronics like how you're supposed to redo them, and tried to sell it for $50, it would have sat here from now on. Or if I'd have gotten anything, it would have been, I'll give you 10 for that. But he can go paint it with a couple of 99-cent cans of rattle can paint. And what was I saying before I got called away? Yeah, we were talking about a Philco console that the dude painted with a red can of rattle can paint and got $40 or $50 for it. But what I was saying was, you know, these flea market characters, they can just slop paint something and people just buy it and think it's the most adorable thing that ever graced the face of the earth. But let somebody fix up one right, and it just sits and sits and sits and sits and sits. I know one time I asked that same flea market vendor, why do you paint nice pieces of furniture and tacky it up all like that? And he said, because if I left it in its original state, it would sit here for 2 years and nobody would buy it. If I paint it up and make it look tacky looking, it'll be gone in a week. So, here you go. Here's your record player. It's painted up, looks very tacky looking. It'll be on eBay. If you want it, that's great. If you don't, then that's fine too, because I can pull the drive mechanism out of this and put it in another one that I have that's actually in a little bit nicer shape.